I knew I was in for a war the moment my boat, the Rescuer, was towed away from the private dock behind my house. Yes, towed away by a specialized crew with screeching cables and a roaring crane on the orders of Cheryl Baxter, the president of the Willow Creek Homeowners Association. Not stopping there, she even sent me an invoice along with a handwritten note scrawled in blue ink. Maybe now you'll keep the lake clean. The kicker was that I was nearly 100 miles away on Lake Silverwood at the time, battling wind and pouring rain, steering the boat on an emergency rescue mission to bring an injured person from a capsized canoe back to shore, literally saving someone's life, while I wrestled with a soaked engine, wiped rainwater from my eyes and shouted over the waves to keep the victim calm. These suburban tyrants decided that my legally permitted boat was a threat to the community's tranquility. That's when I knew this wasn't just a misunderstanding, this was personal. My name is Ethan Caldwell, and I'm not the kind of guy who gives up easily. I used to be a Coast Guard rescuer, facing towering waves and storms that could swallow a ship whole. Now I'm a freelancer, specializing in water rescues and guiding eco-tours around the Lake Silverwood area in Oregon. I moved to Willow Creek a few years ago, a semi-rural neighborhood along the lake, where wooden houses are scattered among pine forests, and sloping lawns lead down to shimmering water. I picked this place because the property I bought had a natural dock out back, not your typical backyard with grass and fences, but a small perfect dock for mooring the Rescuer, the motorboat I use for my work. To me, it's not just a vehicle, it's a part of my life, a tool for saving people, and the thing that gives me a sense of freedom nothing else can match. Willow Creek looks so peaceful, you'd think it's a living painting, the lake reflecting sunlight, waves lapping gently at the dock, and wide open spaces between the houses. I loved the quiet here, far enough from neighbors to miss their arguments, but close enough for them to peek over if they wanted. I figured I could live here in peace, mooring my boat, doing my job, and enjoying silent mornings on the water. But then Cheryl Baxter showed up, and everything changed. Cheryl is the HOA president, a woman in her late 50s, always wearing oversized sunglasses that cover half her face and clutching a clipboard like it's a badge of authority. She appointed herself the guardian of Willow Creek's order, and to her, order meant everything had to be under her control, including my boat. It didn't start with the towing. Before that, she'd sent a few warning letters, neatly typed on HOA logo paper. One said, "Boats aren't allowed to be moored in residential areas, this isn't a harbor." Another complained the engine noise and gas smell disturbed the lake's peace. I laughed reading them, because the Rescuer is fully permitted by the U.S. Coast Guard, and I only run it a couple times a week, always during the day, always following every rule. I even adjusted my routes to avoid bothering the wild ducks around the lake, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. But for Cheryl nothing was enough. She didn't just want me to follow the rules, she wanted me to bow to her self-appointed power. Let me rewind a bit. I live in Willow Creek, a semi-rural neighborhood along Lake Silverwood, Oregon, a place with wide plots of land, sprawling water and skies so open you can hear the wind rustling through the pines before it hits the lake. I bought this house a few years ago, not for the cute wooden cabin with its sloped roof or the porch overlooking the water, but for the natural dock out back. It's a flat, gravelly patch, leading straight to the lake, ideal for mooring the Rescuer, the small motorboat I use for my job. I'm a former Coast Guard rescuer, once working the harshest waters you can imagine, and now I freelance, doing water rescues and eco-tours. To me, having a private dock isn't a luxury, it's part of the job, the thing that lets me rush out to the lake whenever someone needs saving, whenever the emergency phone blares its alarm. Lake Silverwood is my playground, but also my responsibility. I've flipped overturned kayaks back onto the water, hauled drunken fishermen to shore, and once ferried a kid who fell off a float back to his parents while he bawled for ice cream. The work isn't steady, sometimes weeks pass without a call, sometimes I'm bolting out at midnight for a sailboat stuck in fog. But I love it, love the engine's hum under my hands, love the waves slapping the hull, love how the lake shifts from emerald to steel gray when a storm rolls in. The Rescuer isn't just a boat, it's my partner, built to skim fast, small enough to weave through tight spots, and tough enough to handle the worst days. The U.S. Coast Guard licensed it, the county signed off on my dock, and I double-checked every regulation to make sure no one could call me out. But the local homeowners association, that infamous HOA run by Cheryl Baxter, not okay. Very, very not okay. It started with small signs, the first arrows in a war I didn't even know I'd joined. One day I found a note taped to the wooden fence separating my dock from the neighborhood's shared road. It was typed on HOA logo paper, bolded, "Boats aren't allowed to be moored in residential areas. This isn't some Hollywood private harbor." I shrugged, tore it off and tossed it in the trash. I had permits, I had rights, and I didn't have time for this nonsense. A few days later, another letter appeared in my mailbox, unsigned, just a line: "Your boat's engine noise and gas smell are ruining the lake's peace and bothering the wild ducks." I laughed. I run the boat maybe twice a week, always daytime, and I even loop wide to keep the ducks from startling into flight. I'd been a rescue soldier, I knew how to keep things under control, but clearly Cheryl didn't care about facts. To her, the rescuer wasn't a boat, it was a challenge, a thorn in her side she couldn't stand. Cheryl Baxter is the type you'd spot a mile away, oversized sunglasses hiding half her face, golden hair swept back perfectly, and always clutching a clipboard like it's a sword of justice. In her late 50s, she'd crowned herself HOA president for 8 years straight, because no one else wanted the job, and she ran Willow Creek like her own little kingdom. I'd heard she fined a neighbor for planting daisies the wrong shade, too yellow, clashed with the community palette, and once warned a family for leaving their kid's bike out too long. For Cheryl, everything had to bend to her will, and my boat, with its growling engine and undeniable presence on the lake, clearly didn't fit her perfect plan. I tried ignoring her, figuring if I kept everything legal, she'd get bored and back off. But when she had the rescuer towed, I realized I was wrong. This wasn't a petty spat, this was a declaration of war, and I wasn't about to let her win that easily. It didn't stop at those silly warning letters, or Cheryl Baxter's illegal towing stunt. For her that was just the opening shot. Cheryl wasn't the type to settle for annoying me from afar, she wanted victory, wanted me to bow, and she was ready to turn all of Willow Creek into a battlefield to get it. After the towing, I started to see I wasn't just dealing with a nosy neighbor, I was up against someone obsessed with power, who saw her clipboard as a sword and her HOA president title as a crown. Cheryl Baxter was the living nightmare you've heard about from every HOA horror story, and I was about to taste her full brand of crazy. Who's Cheryl? Picture a woman in her late 50s, wearing oversized sunglasses even on cloudy days, golden hair swept back like she just stepped out of an 80s shampoo ad, and always sporting a Bluetooth headset I swear she never actually used. She'd crowned herself HOA president of Willow Creek for 8 years running, not because she won some fair vote, but because no one else was nuts enough to want the gig. For Cheryl, managing the neighborhood wasn't about serving the community, it was a crusade to force her will on all of us. I'd heard she fined an old man for planting sunflowers, too tall blocking sightlines, and once sent a warning letter to a family for leaving their trash bins out exactly 5 minutes past curfew. For Cheryl, everything had to be perfect her way, and the rescuer, my little motorboat moored at my private dock, was clearly a blemish on her ideal canvas. The conflict ramped up fast after those first letters. One day, I found another note taped to the wooden fence near my dock, this time bolded and underlined: "Motorboats cause noise pollution and threaten the lake's ecosystem, must be removed immediately." I ripped it down, muttering to myself that if Cheryl really cared about the ecosystem, she'd worry about the chemical fertilizers from the nearby golf course instead of my boat. Then another letter popped up in my mailbox, unsigned, just a line: "The boat's presence lowers the area's property values." I started wondering if Cheryl had a stockpile of pre-printed complaints, or just sat around all day dreaming up new ways to bug me. I ran the boat maybe twice a week, always daytime, always following U.S. Coast Guard and local rules. I even slowed near the shore to keep waves low, sparing the wild ducks Cheryl insisted were suffering because of me. But nothing I did was enough for her. The real showdown erupted at a community meeting Cheryl called, held in Willow Creek's stuffy common house, a cramped room with rows of plastic chairs and the burnt coffee stench of an old machine. I usually skip these things, but this time I went because Miles Turner, a rare neighbor who'd talked to me, tipped me off that Cheryl was bringing my boat issue to the table. When I walked in, Cheryl stood up front, clipboard in hand, voice trembling with rehearsed outrage. "There's a motorboat," she began, pausing for effect, "that regularly comes and goes on our lake without HOA approval. We don't know what it's carrying, or if it's even safe. For all we know, it could be filming our kids." The room buzzed with gasps. Clearly she'd practiced this drama. I stood up, trying to stay calm, and said, "Cheryl, that's me. I run that boat. It's US Coast Guard approved, and I've saved 3 people this year with it. That threat you're talking about." She blinked, hesitated a second, then snapped back in her shrill signature tone, "Well, this area isn't zoned for your ego." The room went quiet, a few people hiding laughs behind their hands. I sat down, blood rushing to my face, but realizing something: Cheryl didn't care about truth or permits. To her, the rescuer wasn't a rescue tool, it was an act of rebellion, a slap to her self-appointed authority. And after that meeting, I knew she wouldn't stop until my boat was gone, or I did something to make her regret starting this fight. I figured after that community meeting, Cheryl Baxter might back off, maybe think twice before targeting me again. I was wrong. What I didn't expect was an ambush, a sneak attack she launched when I was away, helpless to stop it. One Friday, I got an urgent call from a rescue station, nearly 100 miles from Willow Creek, near a small island in Lake Silverwood. A man had been badly hurt after his boat smashed into rocks in a storm, broken leg, bleeding, and no one else close enough to reach him fast. I jumped into the rescuer, tearing across the lake in pouring rain, the engine roaring over the wind. I found him, gave first aid right on the boat, and got him to shore for the medics. The return trip got delayed by weather, high waves, near zero visibility. So I moored the boat at a public dock near the hospital, leaving a note on my door with an emergency contact before heading out. When I got back to Willow Creek 3 days later, exhausted and soaked, I saw my dock empty. The rescuer was gone, just muddy ground, deep tire tracks, and a crumpled HOA flyer about Spring Lake Beautification Day, rolling in the grass. At first I thought it was stolen. My heart pounded, hands shaking as I grabbed my phone to call the US Coast Guard and local cops. But then I saw the invoice, a sheet from a private towing company, in the next county, nearly 100 miles away. It listed the tow time, boat weight, hauling fee, and a small note, authorized by local HOA president for code violations. At the bottom was Cheryl Baxter's signature, black ink scrawled but unmistakably hers. I stared at that signature, maybe for an hour, feeling my blood freeze and boil at once. Then I laughed, a full-body, half-sane laugh you get when you realize you've just been dragged into a battle of wills with a petty tyrant who thinks my permits are a joke. Cheryl had actually had my boat towed like some kid's bike parked in the wrong spot, and dared to bill me for it. She didn't just cross a line, she torched it, danced over the ashes, and waved her clipboard like a victory flag. I called the US Coast Guard right away, and the guy on the line nearly choked on his coffee hearing it. "She did what? Towed your boat without our order or county approval. That's a legal mess," he said, a hint of amusement in his voice. My second call was to Ryan Mitchell, my cousin, a maritime lawyer who loves digging up legal loopholes and never forgives idiots who mess with family. Ryan listened silently, as I laid it all out, just the occasional sounding dangerous. When I finished, he said, "She just threw herself into a legal pit, with a boat engine strapped to it. Send me the paperwork now." I snapped photos of the invoice, Cheryl's handwritten note, and the Spring Lake Beautification flyer, emailing them all to Ryan. Within an hour, he called back, laughter spilling out, "Ethan, this is legal gold. Towing a boat off private property without owner consent or federal clearance, that's a legal landmine, with water splashing everywhere." But Cheryl wasn't done. Oh no. I decided to confront her directly, politely, with a few neighbors as witnesses. I knocked on her door, a white wooden house, with a perfectly trimmed daisy garden, and when she opened it, I held up the invoice. "Cheryl, what's this about?" I asked, voice calm but firm. She crossed her arms, smirked and said, "We just removed a hazard. The community voted, and safety trumped your hobby." I gritted my teeth. "This isn't a hobby, it's a licensed boat, my rescue tool." She shrugged, voice sharp as a blade, "Not my concern. This isn't a harbor, and now we'll get some peace and quiet." "Peace and quiet," she said. I walked away, feeling like I'd been slapped with a clipboard, but an idea was forming in my head. If Cheryl wanted war, I'd show her what waves could do, and I'd do it in a way she'd never forget. After that short standoff with Cheryl Baxter at her doorstep, I knew reason and permits wouldn't stop her. Cheryl didn't care about facts, she cared about winning, and to her, winning meant crushing me under her shiny high heels. But I'm not the type to sit still and take it. Cheryl had declared war when she had the rescuer towed, and I wasn't just going to get my boat back, I'd make her regret ever touching it. That night, I barely slept, my mind spinning with images of the empty dock, deep tire tracks in the dirt, and Cheryl's smirk when she said, "Now we'll get some peace and quiet." But what kept me awake most was realizing this wasn't just a neighborhood squabble anymore. This was a declaration of war from someone who didn't even know how many rules she'd broken. The next morning, I called Ryan Mitchell again, my cousin, the guy I trusted not just because he's a maritime lawyer, but because he's the kind you want in your corner when things go south. Ryan's an adrenaline junkie with messy hair, and a knack for turning fools into courtroom punchlines. I ran through the whole saga, the warning letters, the community meeting, the towing, the face-off with Cheryl. He listened quietly, just the odd like a predator sizing up prey. When I was done, there was a pause, then he said, "She's cooked. Send me the paperwork." I sent it all, the tow company invoice, Cheryl's handwritten note, the U.S. Coast Guard permit, even pics of the empty dock. An hour later, Ryan called back, "Ethan, she didn't just violate private property laws by towing your boat without consent, she might have breached U.S. Coast Guard regs on handling vessels without authority. She just waltzed into federal territory with a kick me sign on her back." While Ryan started drafting complaints to the U.S. Coast Guard and county, I focused on getting the rescuer back. The impound lot was about 90 minutes drive from Willow Creek, a dusty patch on the edge of the next county, where they usually held seized old fishing boats or abandoned training vessels. When I got there, the manager, a middle-aged guy with a patchy beard, looked nervous. "We don't usually do this," he muttered, leading me through rows of dusty boats to the rescuer. My boat sat there, hull streaked with mud, moored next to busted camp chairs and worn-out floats. "They said it was abandoned and a fire risk," he said, showing me the tow order, a scanned PDF on HOA letterhead, signed by Cheryl Baxter. Seeing the rescuer like that, something in me snapped. This wasn't just an insult, it was sabotage. Cheryl wanted to humiliate me, make the neighbors see me not as a rescuer, but as some weirdo with a toy nobody wanted. I signed the release papers, checked every inch engine anchor lines, hull to ensure no serious damage. Then I drove it home, waves parting behind me, feeling like I'd reclaimed a piece of myself. As I moored it back at the dock, I realized Cheryl had made a mistake bigger than she knew. By towing the rescuer, she'd given me a reason to hit back with zero guilt. She'd drawn first blood, and now it was my turn to strike, with precision she'd never see coming. That night, I scrolled Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace, and a few rural forums around Lake Silverwood. I wasn't after anything pricey, but it had to be just right. Finally, I found it, a high-powered boat speaker system, the kind used for lake parties, paired with a live fish dropper farmers use for stocking ponds. The seller was Hank, a wiry old guy with crooked teeth, a few miles away. When I got there, I hinted at my plan, not specifics, just that I needed to send a special message. Hank grinned. "You ain't dropping fish on trees, are ya?" I shrugged. "Let's call it a gift from the water." He cackled, slapped his knee. "Damn, I'll toss in some extra fish fry for free." By the end of the week, I had everything I needed: speakers, fish dropper, and a rough plan. I didn't just want justice, I wanted to turn the HOA's annual BBQ, that event Cheryl bragged about as a symbol of community order, into a chaos she couldn't control. But it had to be legal, had to be tight, because Cheryl had declared war from her porch armchair, and me, I had waves, and soon she'd be the one drowning in the fallout. Everything was set, and lucky for me, the timing couldn't have been more perfect. I heard through Miles Turner, the rare neighbor who'd still talk to me, that the HOA was hosting its annual BBQ, a big outdoor bash, by Lake Silverwood, that Cheryl Baxter always hyped as the pinnacle of community unity. It was slated for a weekend, with folding chairs, banners and a full buffet, all happening on the sloping lawn right by the water's edge, where Cheryl would stand preaching about order in a chaotic world. I thought, why not give her a taste of real chaos? But then Miles dropped a little bombshell. She invited Counselor Lisa Grayson too. Cheryl wants to show off her model neighborhood to score points with the zoning board. That made me pause. Humiliating Cheryl was fine, spooking the HOA was no big deal, but stirring trouble in front of a local official could spiral out of control. I considered scrapping the plan, but then a sharper, funnier, more targeted idea hit me. BBQ day arrived, the sky clear, golden sun blazing, and a light breeze rippling the lake's waves. From afar, I saw the lawn near the shore decked out like a perfect outdoor party. Plastic chairs in rows, a Willow Creek Unity Day banner strung across a small booth, and a buffet table loaded with burgers, fries, and lemonade. Cheryl stood at the center, in a crisp white shirt and oversized sunglasses, gripping a mic like a washed-up pop star. A crowd of about 50, neighbors, a few HOA members, and Counselor Lisa Grayson in a gray suit, sat listening to her ramble on. I moored the rescuer mid-lake, a few hundred yards out, idling with the engine just loud enough to go unnoticed. As Cheryl launched into her speech, "We're here to maintain order in an unstable world," I hit the throttle, the rescuer's engine roared, and I cruised toward shore at a steady clip, enough to turn heads. Then I flipped on the speakers. "Ride of the Valkyries" blasted across the water, thundering like an invading army, drowning out Cheryl's mic. The crowd stirred, some jumping up. Cheryl stopped, hand shielding her eyes, peering at the lake. When the boat was about 20 yards off, I pressed the fish release. The tank popped open with a soft clack, and hundreds of tiny fry splashed into the water, darting chaotically toward shore, kicking up ripples and non-stop plop-plop sounds. Water sprayed the lawn, a few fish even flopped onto land, rolling among the chairs. Chaos erupted. Cheryl shrieked, her shrill voice cutting through the music. "What is this?" People yelled, chairs toppled, Grayson jolted from her seat, clutching papers like a shield. A kid cheered, "The fish are rebelling." An old lady screamed, "Someone call the cops." I let the boat hover a few seconds, making sure they saw the hull number, legal, undeniable, then eased back to my dock. Through the windshield, I saw Cheryl stomping, pointing wildly at me, waving her clipboard like she was summoning divine wrath. The crowd scattered, some holding their noses at the faint fish smell, though it was barely a thing. From the boat it looked almost artistic, a perfect chaos performance, aimed straight at Cheryl's ego without touching anyone else. When I moored the rescuer back at my dock, heart still pounding, I didn't take off my headset right away. The phone rang, Ryan on the line. "No hello, just what'd you do to go viral?" I frowned. "Huh?" He laughed hard. "Some kid filmed from the lawn, posted it online. 15,000 views in 20 minutes. They added dramatic music and called it Invasion from the Lake." "You good?" I laughed and groaned. "Legally good?" Ryan paused, then said, "Completely legal, no one touched, no public property breached, within Coast Guard limits. Morally, you're a folk hero now." I hung up, stared at the lake, and knew Cheryl wouldn't let this sink quietly, but neither would I. When I got the rescuer back to the dock after the BBQ stunt, adrenaline was still pumping through me. "Ride of the Valkyries" echoed in my head, mixed with Cheryl Baxter stomping and yelling amid the fish frenzy. I hadn't even pulled off my headset when the phone rang. My cousin Ryan Mitchell, no greeting, just straight to it. "You just went viral." I frowned, not fully getting it. "What?" Ryan laughed loud, excitement in his voice. "Some kid filmed from the lawn, put it online. 15,000 views in 20 minutes. They added dramatic music and called it Invasion from the Lake. You okay?" I laughed and groaned, feeling like I'd jumped into the lake without checking the depth. "Legally okay?" I asked. Ryan hesitated a beat, then said, "Completely legal, no one touched, no public property violated, within U.S. Coast Guard bounds. Morally, you're a folk hero now." But it didn't end with Ryan's laughs and backpats. By nightfall, boat BBQ chaos was all over social media. The video from a kid's angle near the buffet caught everything. The rescuer gliding by, speakers blaring, "Ride of the Valkyries," fish fry splashing into the water, Cheryl shrieking like a fish bit her leg. Someone added slow-mo when the water hit the lawn, captioned, "When HOA meets waves." Another cut threw in sitcom laughs every time Cheryl swung her clipboard. By midnight, the main clip passed 50,000 views and Willow Creek split into two camps. Cheryl's loyalists, mostly the type who griped about kids chalking sidewalks, called me the lake vandal. The Freedom crew texted me winks and praise like "peak move, Ethan." Cheryl didn't let me savor the win long. That night, cops knocked on my door, not SWAT, just two tired officers, clearly dragged into overtime. One scoped the dock, asking this where it started. I nodded. "Yes sir, all legal." He sighed, turning to his partner. "Do we really have to do this?" The other shrugged. "Cheryl's been blowing up dispatch, freaking out." I invited them in, brewed coffee, and showed the proof: U.S. Coast Guard permit, boat cam footage, logs proving I stayed within bounds. They watched silently. When the fish hit, one chuckled. "Damn, that's actually impressive." After 20 minutes, they ruled no crime, just a lake fish drop within private boat use. They left with Ryan's card, just in case Cheryl escalated, and escalate she did. By morning, the HOA's email was flooded with furious resident messages demanding Cheryl resign for plunging the neighborhood into chaos. Councilor Lisa Grayson, who'd been at the BBQ, gave a vague statement to the local paper. "Due to unforeseen circumstances, I'll pause commitments with Willow Creek HOA." Cheryl wouldn't give up. She held a mini press conference in her yard, mic in hand, amid her daisy beds, declaring, "Ethan Caldwell sabotaged our event with reckless action. He dropped fish on our community." But before she finished, kids showed up, holding signs saying the lake remembers and giggling, throwing her off completely. Meanwhile, Ryan called with a legal update. Cheryl had filed an official police complaint, accusing me of public disturbance and fish assault. Ryan laughed so hard I heard him smack the desk over the phone. "She's serious? This is the dumbest filing I've ever seen. No damage, no injuries, and you've got video proving it's all legal." He'd checked with the U.S. Coast Guard, who said, "No issue with Caldwell's actions, more creative than we expected." Ryan added, "She's just digging deeper, let me handle it." I sat on my porch, gazing at the lake, sipping coffee, thinking it over. Cheryl wanted quiet. I gave her a water symphony. She wanted control. I showed her waves can't be tamed. But I knew she wouldn't quit, not Cheryl Baxter, not the clipboard-wielding justice warrior. And neither would I. I was ready for the next round, with the rescuer moored tight, waiting to launch. After that BBQ turned into a lake comedy, with fish flailing, Cheryl Baxter screaming, and the video spreading across social media, Willow Creek wasn't the same. Cheryl tried clinging to dignity, with her ridiculous driveway press conference, but those kids with the Lake Remembers signs stole her thunder. By week's end, the HOA couldn't take the heat anymore. Their inbox overflowed with resident emails, not backing Cheryl, but demanding she step down. "She's made us a national laughingstock," one wrote. "I don't pay HOA fees to get fish bombed at a party," another griped. Councilor Lisa Grayson, who Cheryl hoped to impress, bailed entirely, leaving a curt statement in the local paper: "Due to unforeseen circumstances, I won't work further with Willow Creek HOA." Cheryl, with all her arrogance, shot herself in the foot, and I was just the guy who pressed the fish button. But Cheryl wouldn't go down without a fight. She called an emergency HOA board meeting at the Common House, the same spot where she'd publicly bashed me before. I wasn't planning to go, but Miles Turner texted, "You should see this. She's digging her own grave." When I walked in, Cheryl stood up front, face beet red, gripping her clipboard like it was her last lifeline. "Ethan Caldwell ruined our community," she yelled, voice shaking. "He dropped fish on our event, humiliated me, and now the whole country's laughing at us." She pointed at me in the back row, and the crowd turned. I shrugged. "I just drove a legal boat and released some fry. If you hadn't towed my boat, this wouldn't have happened." The room let out stifled laughs, and Cheryl's face reddened more. The meeting spiraled fast. A group of residents, who'd stayed quiet under Cheryl's reign, stood up to push back. "We're sick of fines for dumb stuff like door paint or grass height," one said. "You towed Ethan's boat with no right. Who gave you that power?" Cheryl stammered, "I did it for community safety." But no one bought it anymore. The board voted on the spot, an emergency ballot Cheryl couldn't stop. by a landslide, she was ousted as president. She screamed through it, threatening lawsuits, demanding recounts, calling me a lake menace, but her voice drowned in applause from folks who'd put up with her too long. As she stormed out, I heard her mutter, "I'll move to a gated community where people respect rules." Cheryl's exit didn't end there. Days later, a for sale sign popped up at her white wooden house, her pristine daisy garden, now a bitter goodbye. A local realtor told me she left in 10 days, house spotless, except for a note on the oven. "This place doesn't deserve me." No one shed tears. The kid down the street even waved a paper boat model, dropping leaves off his roof as her car peeled out, a symbolic send-off I had to admit was pretty clever. With Cheryl gone, the HOA picked Linda Hayes, a retired teacher with a warm smile and no-nonsense vibe, as the new president. Linda wasn't into clipboards or oversized sunglasses. She was the first to say the HOA should serve residents, not the other way around. One afternoon, she stopped by my place, coffee mug in hand, and said, "Ethan, we need you as a water safety advisor. You clearly know your stuff." I laughed. "You mean after the fish?" She winked. "Exactly. But next time, maybe something less smelly." I agreed on one condition: no more petty fines for my boat or anything like it. Linda nodded. "Deal." When Cheryl vanished from Willow Creek, a fresh breeze blew through. She'd crowned herself queen for 8 years, ruling with pettiness and warning letters, but now she'd fallen, and me with a boat, some fish, and a dramatic tune, helped speed it up. The story wasn't over though. I knew Cheryl wouldn't forget me easily, and I wouldn't forget her. The rescuer stayed moored, ready for whatever came next. When Cheryl Baxter left Willow Creek with her tail between her legs, it was like the neighborhood shed a weight no one knew we'd been carrying. Linda Hayes, the new HOA president, didn't waste time shaking things up. HOA meetings stopped being torture sessions of warnings and clipboards. They turned into real talks about fixing roads or adding benches along Lake Silverwood's shore. Kids played in the streets again, floating paper boats on the lake without anyone yelling about littering the view. My neighbor Miles Turner even built a treehouse for his kids, and no one emailed complaints. One day, I saw a guy paint his door a bold blue, something Cheryl once called emotionally disruptive, and nobody cried or pulled out a grass ruler. It was like we'd woken from a daze under Cheryl's clipboard reign, realizing we didn't have to live scared of silly rules. I didn't mean to become Willow Creek's hero, but it seems that fish stunt at the BBQ changed how folks saw me. People who'd avoided me now smiled as I passed, some flashing a thumbs up like "nice one." One morning, I took the rescuer out to check the engine, and kids on the shore waved shouting "Captain Fish," a nickname they gave me after the video went viral. Miles painted a little boat on his shed roof with "Dock here if Cheryl returns," making me laugh every time I saw it. Linda kept her word, no more boat warning letters or anything like that. Instead, she asked me to run a free boat trip for the neighborhood kids, letting them see the lake from my view. I said yes, and as the kids cheered on the rescuer, I realized Willow Creek hadn't just changed, it had become my home in a way I never expected. My rep didn't stay local. The invasion from the lake video kept spreading, racking up hundreds of thousands of views. Local news jumped in, dubbing it the Captain's Rebellion, or Oregon's Water Win. A late-night show nicknamed me Captain Fish, and a fake Twitter account called Lake Hero started posting HOA rules like no mooring if Cheryl disapproves. Ryan called one day, chuckling, "You accidentally started a movement. People mail from all over, thanking you for standing up to control freaks." I got a letter from an Arizona pilot, with a pic of him holding a "Control This" sign at his HOA office, and a Texas mom wrote that I inspired her to fight a backyard chicken ban. I didn't know whether to laugh or worry. I just wanted my boat left alone, not to be some symbol. Then a surprise came in the mail, a thin envelope from the U.S. Coast Guard with an official seal. I opened it, half expecting a late fine, but it was a letter from a regional director. "We reviewed the footage from the Lake Silverwood event," it read. "While not a Coast Guard-sanctioned activity, it's the most creative boat use we've ever seen. Enclosed is a commemorative certificate for your contribution to water safety and community spirit." Inside was a playful certificate, Captain of the Year Service on Water and Freedom, with a handwritten note, "Try balloons next time, less smell." I hung it in my shed, right by the BBQ speakers, and grinned every time I saw it. Willow Creek's a different place now, no Cheryl, no fear, just people living true to themselves. I didn't run for HOA president like some suggested. I'm not cut out for measuring grass or checking paint swatches. But as Linda and the residents rewrote the rules, I knew I'd help change things, not by dropping fish from the sky, though that didn't hurt, but by standing up when folks like Cheryl tried to choke out others' freedom. Every time I took the rescuer out, I felt lighter, knowing the waves belonged to all of us now. When the dust, or rather the fish smell, settled in Willow Creek, I sat on my porch, watching Lake Silverwood gleam in the morning sun, thinking about what went down. Cheryl Baxter was gone, leaving a freer, looser neighborhood, where kids floated paper boats and folks painted doors whatever they liked without penalty fears. Linda Hayes led the HOA with practicality and kindness, and the rescuer sat safe at my dock, no longer threatened by warning letters or tow trucks. I never aimed to be a hero or rebel. I just wanted to moor my boat in peace, do my rescue work, and live my life. But when Cheryl tried crushing not just my boat but my freedom, I had to remind her, and myself, that sometimes you've got to make waves to hold your own water. I haven't reused the speakers or fish dropper since that BBQ day, not because I can't, but because I don't need to. One cruise with Ride of the Valkyries and a few hundred fry said it all, louder than any of Cheryl's warnings. Every weekend morning, as I took the rescuer out to test the engine or just feel the air, kids waved from the shore, yelling Captain Fish. Some older folks even asked for a ride, saying they wanted to see Willow Creek from the water, the way only the captain does, they said. I laughed and obliged, feeling like I didn't just get my boat back, I got the community back from Cheryl's grip. Looking back, I never wanted to be a legend. I just wanted the rescuer moored steady, freedom to do my job without a clipboard tyrant hassling me. But when you're pushed to the edge, when someone tries stealing not just your boat but your right to live your way, you've got to act. For me, that was sailing through Cheryl's BBQ, cranking the music and dropping fish, not because I had to, but because I could. Turns out, that could was stronger than all the petty rules Cheryl ever tried to enforce. Ryan called weeks later, still giggling about the U.S. Coast Guard's Captain of the Year certificate I'd hung in my shed. "You know, Ethan," he said, "you pulled off what lawyers like me dream of, taking down a dictator, without stepping into court." I shrugged over the phone. "I just wanted my boat." He laughed hard. "Yeah, and now you've got a whole lake too." He wasn't wrong. Willow Creek was ours now, not Cheryl's, not the HOA's, but the people living here, from kids with paper boats to old-timers watching the lake from their porches. Every time I took the rescuer out to mid-Lake Silverwood, I cruised a slow loop around the lawn, where that BBQ went down, not too close, just enough for folks to look up and remember that once when pettiness tried to rise, it got drowned by something bigger. Not words, but waves, music, and a dash of lake creativity. Cheryl might have forgotten me, but I won't forget her, not out of spite, but because she taught me a lesson. Freedom isn't something you keep by staying quiet, it's something you guard by standing up on shore or mid-waves. And if another clipboard-wielding control freak shows up, I've still got the rescuer, and a spare fish tank, just in case. The story of Ethan Caldwell and his clash with Cheryl Baxter in HOA. Cheryl tried to tow my boat, so I sailed it through their annual BBQ event, mirrors a real slice of life in the U.S. Today, the tension between personal freedom and community control, especially in neighborhoods with homeowners associations (HOAs). In America, HOAs are often set up to keep order and property values steady, but sometimes they turn into tools for folks like Cheryl, bossy types forcing petty rules on everyone's lives. Ethan, with his boat the rescuer and rescue gig, stands for Americans who value personal liberty and social duty, while Cheryl, with her clipboard and oversized sunglasses, embodies over-the-top bureaucracy, common in tight-knit suburban enclaves. Cheryl's illegal tow and Ethan's clever payback, sailing through the BBQ, blasting Ride of the Valkyries, and dropping fish, echo the real clash between private property rights and self-appointed power, a struggle plenty of Americans face in HOA zones. The lesson here isn't just about fighting injustice, it's how to do it smart and legal in today's U.S. scene. Ethan didn't go rogue or break laws, he leaned on his U.S. Coast Guard permit, Ryan's legal backup, and creativity, speakers and fish, to make his point. It's a reminder that in a country big on law and free speech like the US, you can defend your rights without crossing lines. Take a page from Ethan: when you hit Cheryl's in life, overbearing bosses, nosy neighbors, dumb rules, know your rights like Ethan with the Coast Guard, find solid allies like Ryan, and use humor or ingenuity, like the fish drop, to turn pressure into possibility. Life in America today is full of similar tests, from land use spats to personal freedoms, and Ethan's tale shows that sometimes, a bit of waves and loud tunes can shake a whole system, as long as you're standing on firm ground. If you liked how Ethan used waves and a fish tank to take down Cheryl, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next freedom ride. Thanks for watching the Lake Silverwood Showdown. See you in the next video with more waves and surprises.